Wonderful. Okay, I think we'll crack on. I'm one of those people. I love to get started as quickly as we possibly can. I appreciate it's also Monday afternoon as well, and you're going to be wanting to get home. So let's crack on. If there's any problems with any sound or anything at all, please use the chat function or raise your hand or whatever, and do let me know. Otherwise, I'll look like an absolute noddy waffling on for the next 20 minutes or so. So anyway, listen, thank you so much indeed for your time. Really good to have you here, and I hope it's going to be a good return on your time investments as well. It's quite an interesting time for a lot of organizations, and there's a lot of challenges that organizations are facing as well, particularly when it comes to trying to get greater media attention for your brand, your business, your organization, however you describe the entity in which you work for. So essentially the next slide, the remainder of this session is going to be a case of I'm going to yap to you for about 22, 23 minutes or so. I have timed it, so hopefully we'll be pretty much bang on. And that leaves a good 6 or 7 minutes for any questions that you have. But please do ask any questions in the Q&A or the chat afterwards, and we'll address those. So let's get cracking on, if that's okay with you. We're going to go through a few things, and I'm going to share some real life examples which will really bring context and enable you to really get a great idea for how you're going to be able to boost the amount of media attention that you're currently getting within the organization. So this should be good. It should be a really good session for everybody, and I'm hoping you're going to get quite a lot out of this as well. Before we get cracking, I guess I feel like I should slightly justify why I'm okay to actually stand here or sit here, as the case may be, talking about this. Essentially, I've been working in the media for 30 years. I think the grey hair is starting to show, and that really just demonstrates the experience that I've got. The first 10 I spent working in advertising for local and national newspapers, and then the last 20 or so, just over 20, have been working in journalism and PR. And there's been a lot of change in the media over the last few years, and that's made it increasingly difficult to get the attention that you really do want to be getting, and arguably should be getting as well. I established Clearly PR in 2014, and we work with organizations both here in the UK, but also in the US as well. And the challenges faced in the US are very, very similar to those over here from a media perspective as well. We became a B Corp in 2021. We were the very first, well, one of the very first, not just in the UK, but globally, PR agencies to become certified. I'm really proud of that. I'm very, very glad about that. And since September of last year, we've been committed to providing pro bono support and doing things like free webinars like this, which is no selling involved, I can assure you, to really try and help other certified businesses and brands to get their messages out there, to be seen, heard, and read by the right people in the right way and at the right time. And we've got the skills to be able to do that, and we're more than happy to share those insights. And if you haven't already, we've actually helped over 170 actually since September. And if you haven't already, we also do a weekly newsletter, which is promoted quite a bit on the Beehive. So have a look at that on a Thursday or on a Friday. And again, no selling involved with that. It's purely sharing experiences, sharing some case studies, hints, tips, ideas. And the idea is always for us is that anyone reading it or anyone attending a webinar like this can leave with 2 or 3 really good ideas that you can adopt, adapt, and then hopefully generate the interest for your brand that you are looking to get. We're big practitioners in practicing what we preach, and we do treat ourselves like a client. So we recognize the value of what PR can do for a business and for a brand, particularly as someone who spent the first decade of my career selling advertising, creating advertising campaigns for large-scale brands. I recognize the importance of advertising, and I'll never ever try and replace that. But PR, in terms of the longevity, is absolutely critical. It's how we built our business, and still remains the greatest lead generator for us, because it enables us to increase our influence on decision making, even though organizations may not be looking for business in the here and now. In 4 or 5 months' time, they will be, and it ensures that you stay top of mind for when those decisions are being made. And there's a lot of media that we've appeared in over the last 6 months in our own merit as well, and we tend to talk about ESG communications, organizations who have been caught out for exaggerating their green and social credentials, shall we say. But we talk a lot about responsible reputation management, personal branding, and crisis communication. So recent examples have been the Marks and Spencer cyber attack. Harry and Meghan, I really don't know why, but I think I've been quoted about 10 times in the last year in various national newspapers talking about Harry and Meghan, which is great. I don't really know an awful lot about them, but I can talk about them from a reputation perspective. So we live and breathe this stuff for ourselves every day, and hopefully you'll be able to start getting more coverage for yourselves as well. But there are some stumbling blocks, which many of you will be aware of, but hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a better sense of how to potentially overcome them. There are 6 key challenges that we've identified, and they're from clients that we've worked with, who we've onboarded, and also those B Corps who we've spoken, and also ESG-led organizations who may not be certified. These are the things that they constantly are coming back with, and they're kind of like banging their heads against a brick wall thinking, how on earth are we going to overcome these? One of them is about unclear messaging, and that's not getting to the point quick enough with your press release or media statement that you're sending out to journalists and editors. And a great example of this is a few years ago, I interviewed the Minister for the Environment at the Welsh Assembly Government, as it was known then. And it was when Wales had become the first fair trade nation in the world. And she asked me at the end of the interview, she said, we sent out a press release and we got no media attention other than the Welsh media. The English press, and when she mentioned the English press, she was saying the Times, the Telegraph, the Guardian, those sorts of titles, they're just not interested. And I said, well, you sent out a 6-page press release, and never at any point did you actually say Wales has become the first fair trade nation. That was the story. And you didn't actually tell the story. Tell the story. Get to the point. Forget the waffle, the flannel, the fluff. Get to the point of what you're trying to say, because this ties into kind of like point 3 and 4, really, because journalists don't have time. If you go back 4 or 5 years ago, a typical journalist on a national newspaper, for example, would be charged with having to do 2, maybe 3 articles per day, tops. That's a pretty big ask, and particularly, we're professional writers. We'd find that quite a challenge. Fast forward to today, and Reach PLC, who are the biggest newspaper group in Europe, who own the Daily Mirror, the Liverpool Echo, those sorts of titles. Their journalists are having to do between 7 and 8 articles every single day, and they can be between 300 and 500 words per article, which means they have to produce an article from scratch every hour, on the hour, over the course of a working day. When they get time for lunch or to go for a pee, I haven't got a clue. But this is really showing you the challenge that you're facing. They don't have a huge amount of time. They want you to get to the point very, very quickly. And it's very much like a CV. You get a CV coming through for a job that you're hiring for, and it doesn't actually grab your attention in that executive summary. They're not going to move beyond that point, and your CV is going to go in the bin. It's the same with the press release. You need to say everything about the story in the opening 2 sentences tops. You're looking about 50 words, roughly. Who, what, when, where, and why. Why does it matter? The other key point really is about organizations thinking they've got the makings of a great story, but actually, in hindsight, nobody outside the 4 walls of their organization really cares. It could be about someone's been hired, or they've expanded somewhere, or it's kind of relatively nondescript. For them, it's a big story. Outside, it's not a big story. So there's a lack of real awareness as to what is the media interested in hearing about, and that's what they want to know. There's a lot of press releases that we've seen and organizations who have brought us in to help them with their stories that really are too self-centered. They focus on we're this, we're the market leader at this, we're the greatest, we're the biggest, we're the oldest, we're the largest, whatever it is. It's all about me, 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 me. Journalists don't care. They don't care one bit. Their job is to serve their readers, their listeners, their viewers, and to figure out, is what this organization is saying of any interest to the hundreds of thousands or the tens of thousands of people we could be potentially putting them in front of. So you have to really think, who really cares about this story? And finally, the biggest challenge really is skepticism about anything ESG related, that's not your fault. That's simply down to the fact of big brands, Brewdog, H&M, Prada, various others who spoil the party for most of us by exaggerating their green credentials because they know consumers are increasingly making purchasing decisions based on how a company behaves, what it says, what it does. A lot of these brands are jumping onto that and they're saying, hey, yes, we're green, we're sustainable, we're all about community, when actually they're not. They're paying lip service to it, but they're not. And that has turned journalists against ESG related stories. But, and as you'll see in a few moments, this can be very, very easily overcome. You've just got to use numbers. And we'll go through a few examples of this. So over the course of the next few minutes, I'm going to share some real case studies. These are organizations who are primarily ESG led, or they are B certified companies. And they're from a rich mix of different sectors, from professional services to beauty, healthcare, consumer, and charities. And we're going to start with a charity because charities are still businesses at the end of the day. And this one was a charity that was founded 2 years ago. And we were brought on board to help them 2 years ago. So they've only been going for a handful of months. And they operate within the mental health space. The difficulty with mental health, as the lights go off in this building, time sensitive, the difficulty with mental health charities is that there's already 2,000 of them in operation in the UK, specifically England and Wales, I should say. And you have to think about there's Mind, there's Calm, there's Samaritan. Some of them are almost 100 years old. They also have marketing and promotional budgets the size of a small country's GDP. So when you've got a new charity coming to the fray and trying to say, hey, listen, we want to get national attention, we're like, okay, what's the hook here? We need to find something. We need to find a voice that's going to help you to stand out, because at the moment, it's going to be a bit of a no-go. So we need to understand what those are. The charity, first of all, was set up by a chap whose son tragically took his own life a few years beforehand. And he wanted to improve the general conversation around suicide. More importantly, he wanted to change the conversation and the stigma attached to suicide as well. And the temptation was always going to be talking about numbers. And if you look at the majority of charities in their advertising and promotion, they will bang on about numbers all the time. That's okay to a degree, but it doesn't really resonate that much as what you'd like it to with the people who can affect change, government and the general public who you need to generate revenue from. We took a slightly different approach to this, and it was a phenomenal campaign to be working on, because we needed to find out what else they could do. And they were wonderful in the sense that they had case studies. They had people who had been affected by suicide, a loved one, a family member, a colleague, a friend, who had taken their own life, and they were prepared to go on record to talk about how it had affected them in their lives. Well, we took that, but that wasn't necessarily going to be enough. Because it was an unknown entity as a charity, we then needed to find others who could amplify the message, for want of a better word. So we looked in the public domain to find out, well, okay, what celebrities, major or minor celebrities, have been open about discussing their own mental health. And we had Daniel Ricciardo, F1 driver, who's pictured here. That was the charity was called a Baton of Hope, and it was a physical baton that they actually created. So they had something visible to actually show, and there was a really impressive symbol, powerful symbol. He's spoken about his own struggles with mental health. There was Dr. Alex George, who is a real doctor, and many of you will know him from Celebrity Love Island. Not really my bag, but hopefully you'll know who we mean. Fatboy Slim, Norman Cook, he's spoken openly about his own mental health challenges as well. And these were all people who were prepared to amplify the message by getting involved with the campaign, doing it free of charge, and trying to spread the word of the importance of being more aware of mental health, but equally talking about their own experience as well. The reason why we talk about this one in particular is because it's about storytelling, and you'll hear a lot about storytelling whenever you're Googling or going on other webinars to try and find out how to get more media coverage for your organization. But it's a really, really powerful thing in order to be able to do. So we always talk about this and we think, most businesses have stories that they can tell. It's just figuring out what's going to resonate with your target audience. A great example of storytelling was a large-scale manufacturer that we worked with a few years ago who makes rubber gloves. Let's be honest, not the most exciting of products that you can produce, but they make surgical gloves, which are around 2 to 3 pence per pair. So not much value is attached to that particular product, as it were. Well, they had just become endorsed by the Royal Society of Surgeons and they wanted to do a big splash about it. But they didn't know, surprisingly, how to do it and how to make it interesting. And neither did we, to be perfectly honest with you. But then after well, a little bottle of red wine kind of came to play, we had a bit of a sort of brainwave, and we decided, let's have a look at the history of the manufacturing of rubber gloves in the first place. And we tracked it back to the 1890s in the USA. And it all came about as the result of a love affair between a surgeon and his nurse, who he'd fallen in love with. And she was getting infections. She was in her mid-20s. Her hands were all mangled, like a 90-year-old woman's hands, because there was no protection for hands in those days. So he had a friend who worked for the Goodyear Tire Company and said, can you create a glove which has got the dexterity to perform small procedures such as stitching, that sort of thing? As a result, the modern surgical glove was born. And then when you fast forward a couple of years, it became widespread, the use of surgical gloves. And at the same time, it saw a significant drop in the number of women who were dying from childbirth, because what they found was happening was that doctors and surgeons weren't washing their hands between one procedure and another. And it's like, for us, it's totally logical. Back then, it wasn't, but the death rate dropped. And you think about how many lives were saved as a result of a love affair between a doctor and a nurse. So we envisaged a surgeon, a modern day surgeon, in the operating theatre saying, did you know the modern surgical glove came about as a love affair between two people, blah, blah, blah. It's about storytelling. And suddenly a 2 or 3 pence product suddenly had an emotional attachment to it as well. That piece of coverage, that charity that we were talking about, generated over 370 pieces of national media coverage, which was the biggest campaign we've ever worked on in our lives. And the picture of Rishi Sunak is there because it caught the attention of him when he was the PM. And he did a 1 minute, 10-second piece to camera specifically for this. And he described the campaign as the UK's largest ever suicide prevention initiative. We'll take that. It was massive. It was absolutely huge. There are very many other campaigns that we can talk about, and I'm just looking at the time. We've only got a handful of minutes left. Very quick one with this one. This was a recruitment company, 40,000 people. They did the 4-day working week. No one had ever done it before. They tracked it for 6 months. They got a huge amount of data, and what they found was absolutely significant. They saw staff retention rates increase by 95%. Incidences of mental health dropped by 87% within that period of time, and there's a 25% increase in productivity and sales within 6 months. We then took those findings and turned those into a series of stories, which we then went to the media. 5 years on, the CEO is still talking about these stories. And what we did was we looked at a particular thing. So the story was introduce a 4-day working week. But then we looked at all those other topics. There's a 4-day working week. What else can we talk about? Mental health, employee benefits, all those sorts of things. And the conversation just continues and continues and continues. They got themselves on Sky News, BBC Radio, as you saw with Evan Davis there. Wired magazine, Forbes quoted them, still quoted them 3 times after we stopped working with them a handful of years ago as well. The point being is that you need to tap into trends as well and think about who's talking about what and how can we tag on what we are doing with what is already front of mind for people in the general public or in the trade media, whoever it is you're talking to. Very quick one was an organic food producer. Last year became certified. They wanted to raise their profile within the Cambridgeshire press. Difficulty was Abel and Cole and Riverford Foods are already B Corps, also based in Cambridgeshire, and have been B Corps since 2017 and 2018, respectively. So we needed to find some kind of hook that was going to help position them as something a bit different. They came to us having already tried to pitch the media and not getting a single piece of coverage. So we then reposition them because we found out, well, actually, they are actually the oldest food manufacturer in the county to become a B Corp, and the second oldest business in the county in general to become one. And even though there is only a small number of certified businesses in the region, we actually use that to their advantage and say, well, actually, they're heading up. This select group of B Corps are really trying to create change, drive change within the business community within that region. A key point to remember here is that Alexander Graham Bell did not invent the telephone. It was already invented. He just figured out a way of making it work. And this is exactly the same thing when you're approaching your own PR as well. It may not be the biggest, the fastest, the newest, the oldest, the richest, the poorest, whatever the case may be. It's figuring out what contribution can you make and then tailoring your story accordingly. Another great example was an organic fruit drinks maker who were, you could say they were trying to compete with Innocent, but they're somewhat behind Innocent, but they've got significant aspirations. But again, they were struggling to get media coverage because when analysing what they've been putting out there, a lot of it was focused on, look at us, we got a bit of investment because we're great. So, well, okay, that's okay, but what does that mean? Actually, what it means is that you're able to expand your premises, you can expand your product range, you'll be able to create more jobs within the local community. You'll be able to create more jobs within the communities of those where you get your raw supplies from as well. And it's really getting you to think laterally about these things and think, okay, we may have got more money. What does that mean? And it's remembering to be that kid at school who in class, and I'll be honest with you, I was that annoying kid who would always say, yeah, but so what? So what? My daughter is almost 3 and her favorite word is why. Everything is why. And I will answer her 3 or 4 times. And by the 5th time, I'm really struggling to give any kind of explanation. But that's what you need to think about because journalists are going to be asking, but why? Why does that matter? Why have you done that? What's the implication there? And that's how you need to be thinking about it. Also try and avoid talking about your founders or about your commitment to whatever in language that is quite frankly annoying to journalists. You and I are in an echo chamber. We are all very passionate about what we do because we're B Corps. We're trying to affect change in as bigger ways we possibly can. There's almost 3,000 B Corps in the UK. There's 5.6 million small businesses. There's a long way to go, but collectively we can achieve a huge amount. But there's a real temptation for B Corp companies to talk about passionate, super excited and all that kind of stuff. Journalists hate that language. Talk to them like they want to be spoken to. Facts. Talk about facts. Not hyperbole, not emotion. Talk about facts. That's what's going to resonate with them. With this particular company, what was fascinating was that having conversations with them, they were saying that, oh, actually, and it was just off the cuff remark, we've actually saved thousands of tons of food waste from going to landfill. It's like, how many thousands? And they told us the number. It's like, why aren't you talking about this? Why aren't you campaigning about helping to reduce the food waste mountain in the UK? Why aren't you making connections between, actually, that could feed X number of people, that could help reduce this sort of like disease or whatever. And what I mean by that is that they were also supplying surplus stock to schools in disadvantaged areas. Well, there is a correlation, and we found this from the University of Exeter. There's a correlation between the diet of an infant and up to secondary school level, up to the age of 11, and life attainment in terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of economic status. If you have a healthy diet at a young age, you can positively affect those things in later life. This is what they did. They started talking about this more frequently in their PR, and that's helped them to get media coverage. And the final one that we're very, very quickly going to touch on is this is a global skincare brand. It's on every high street in the UK. You'll know who they are. I'm not going to say who they are, but you'll probably guess who they are. This company is famed for a particular flour, but this flour it's a key ingredient. But they've also done a lot of their branding around this flour. This flour is on the brink of extinction. And that was going to affect not only their product line, but also their reputation, their entire branding. So what they did was they invested significantly in rejuvenating stocks of this particular flour. And they did it successfully. But they hit an impasse, and we were then called upon, and we had their entire PR function for the UK and for Europe saying we're at a bit of a loss. We want to talk about this, but we're afraid of being accused of greenwashing. And we just started drilling down and asking, so what, why questions all the time. And what we found was that it was a huge investment, several million pounds of investment, but it also created significant amount of new jobs. It also boosted the ecosystem. And they had become a company really focused on green hushing, i.e. not talking about their green and social credentials, and to one that was actually more prepared to go public and say, actually, this is what we've done. And the reason they were able to do this is because we were able to help them identify the data, lead with the data. And this is where a lot of the big brands who are guilty of greenwashing have fallen down, because they can't substantiate the claims that they're making. If you have pounds, shillings, pence, percentages, you can. We've done this, which has created this, or has led to this. We have invested this, which has reduced homelessness by X% and taken X number of people off the streets, etc., etc. You get the point. And finally, I think, is just really, 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 really think about how you're using numbers. Numbers are absolutely vitally important. A couple of examples here. Use 375 out of 500 people surveyed rather than saying 3/4 of people or 75% of people. It's a psychology thing. I personally prefer to say 75%, but psychologists have told us something very, very different. That's not how information is received to the maximum effect. Investment of £500,000 is more powerful than saying £500,000. It's small details, but they can have a significant impact. So key things to remember, really, back up what you're saying with any data. Always think about who cares outside of the four walls of our organization, of what we're about to say. Are we using too much hyperbole? Things like we're excited, we're passionate, we're purpose-led, all that kind of stuff. Unless you're talking to people who are operating in the same space, stop talking like that. Journalists don't have time. They want to know what's in it for me if I run with this story. Give them the facts, give them as much data, preempt their questions as much as you possibly can. And then any gaps that need to be filled, you can then fill thereafter. Try and avoid talking about yourself all the time. Focus on the story and think about what really matters to those who are going to be watching, listening, or reading this as well. That's it. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. There's only one Paul Mackenzie Cummins. I'm not saying I'm truly unique, but the name is, so it should be quite easy to find. Keep an eye out on the Beehive Forum on Thursday, usually Thursday afternoon, for reference to the newsletter, or just go into our website and you can just type in B Corp newsletter after the domain name, and it's got the full archive on there as well. Again, it's all about providing you with hints and tips and ideas to help you get more for your media coverage as well. And if you do need a little bit of support as well, there is a link on there that any work that you do through us, you actually get 20% discount as an immediate giveaway, as it were, for any B course. So please do ask any questions. I'll hang on for another moment or two. And hopefully what you've heard will resonate in some way. Hopefully there'll be a few tips in there that you can take and adapt to your own business. If you ever want to speak to me off this webinar, I think you've got my email address when you signed up for this, but if not, just go through to the Clearly website on the contacts page. Any of those drop-down menus go straight through to me anyway. I'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions, and if I can't, I'll try and find the answers for you anyway. So I'll give it another few moments, and I'll have a quick scroll, see if there's any questions in there at the moment. A lot of AI assistants, that's very cool. It's a way of things, isn't it? Things are moving forward. That's an interesting point actually on AI, very, very quickly. We found that about 20% of our traffic coming through to our website has come from ChatGPT. And the reason for that is because a lot of the content that we do in terms of when we get in the press, we repurpose it as a blog on our website, but we're very careful about the keywords that we're using. So we know lots of people will look for crisis management, crisis communications, ESG communications, those sorts of things. So if that's the subject matter that we're talking about, we'll embed that language in the content that we're providing. And it's enabled ChatGPT to pick us up quite easily. One of the most popular articles on our website at the moment is What's the best time to send out a press release? And it's come from ChatGPT. And it's really simple. So any content that you're putting on your website as well, if it's whether you've been in the media or not, always be thinking, if you were going on to Google or if you're going on to ChatGPT or Copy AI or any of those, and about to ask a question about a particular topic, how would you phrase it? And then think, am I phrasing it like this in the content that I'm providing, or even in the press releases that I'm providing as well? And try and think about it in that way, and that will boost the amount of traffic that you have coming through to your website as well. Thank you all very much indeed. 3:32. So actually, for me, that's not bad. I'm quite happy with that. Give me a shout if there's anything I can do for you. But have a great rest of the week, and I hope we get the opportunity to speak again, online, offline, in person, over a cuppa anytime soon. Thank you very much indeed. Have a great one. See you soon.